This is Measurement Where. I'm Kostya. I've spent more than 10 years working on one problem, making marketing measurement actually work. Today, I'm joined by Vuk, CMO at HeyReach, and before that, the marketing leader behind Lemlist growth to over 13 million IRR. Vuk has scaled SaaS companies through the exact fog where attribution breaks down. Today, we are going to unpack how he actually measures it. Vuk, welcome.
Hey man, thanks for the invite. I'm really honored and happy to do this with you.
Thank you very much. So let's start with the questions. Give us the 60-second picture, what you own at HeyReach, size of the marketing operation, and how do you describe the growth motion in several sentences?
Okay, so marketing basically at HeyReach is split into, let's say, awareness and branding side and everything from, growth ops. And everything between those two lines, this is my world and my team's world. So we worry about, people hearing about HeyReach, word of mouth is our primary channel and everything kind of amplifying, the good word about our product. And then on the flip side, it's, all the growth marketing, generating leads, qualifying, demand generation, demand creation, whatever fancy word you want to use. Somehow this is all within our, universe. And that's basically the marketing of HeyReach. Yeah. Like shorter than 60 seconds.
Yeah, that was spot on. When you joined, what was the state of measurement and what did you inherit with versus building from scratch?
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of, before joining full-time, to join as their consultant. I had like my one-man agency back then, and I think they were around, forget me, like I forgot the exact number, but it's like 10, 15K MRR, something like this, maybe 20, 25. Anyhow, definitely below 50K MRR. And back then, the guys were still figuring out their PMF, like product market fit, making some critical decisions that were very, very instrumental back then. And I would say once the product market fit was found, they started figuring out things in a very nice way. So you have two co-founders and the CRO who are very driven in that way to make things better. And so even before I switched full-time, I spent almost a little bit less than 2 years. I'm getting old, so I forget timeframes, but a little bit less than 2 years. And they started kind of picking things up, building it in a nice way from qualification, making sure that we're not only caring about total free trials, but qualified free trials, and we're kind of analyzing every tier separately, for example. And before I joined full-time, the company was 2.7 million ARR. That was January 2025, and I joined full-time. We hit like 3 million in that, and slowly we started building up things bit by bit, brick by brick, and making things better. But they started even before they had me, honestly.
Sounds great. That's like a typical story of the founding marketer, and looks like you did heavy lifting, avoiding going through the cluttered marketing stack inherited from somebody else.
Yeah. The good thing about it is when you're a consultant, I get to know the business, and when we started discussing me potentially joining full-time, the onboarding wasn't needed. I was already in it. I knew the strings, and we vibed together. It was easy to work with, and the rest is history, I guess.
That's like marketing on subscription. You tried out the trial period. Now you can purchase a subscription for a full-time.
Exactly. That's a good analogy.
I like your approach. Definitely resonates with me. What is the current marketing mix of HeyReach? How is it different to what you owned at Lemlist, for example?
Yeah, so I would say that the GTM space itself, or outbound space, however you want to call it, it changed dramatically in a sense, with all this enrichment and AI agents, and it's still the same channels. They just operate a little bit differently. What makes HeyReach unique, I guess, it's our word of mouth model, where a lot of our content and our distribution model gets amplified through, our users, ambassadors, experts, creators, our version of influencers and things like that. So that's one of the unique things I think we've successfully built at HeyReach. It's first time for me that word of mouth is, that big. And that's what makes it unique. It's our strongest performing channel. For example, we currently are at 16 million, but we finished 2025 at 10. And the primary, channel for us, the most powerful one, was word of mouth. And over 90% of revenue and acquisition comes from inbound. So which was like, very cool. Lemlist was also like an inbound driven organization. I know we did some cool things with content, but with HeyReach, that's the primary thing we do, and it's split through different departments. So in my team, you have the content team, you have the partnerships team, and you have like the guys handling growth ops and things like that. So we all have this word of mouth distribution in the back of our mind when we are thinking about something. So for example, If a content team is going to do some stuff for the blog, usually you will always see a user of HeyReach who's spotlighted in the article, or a partner or an integration partner, and then we distribute it together. If we're talking about partnerships, whether it's creators, experts doing some events, there's always like a user, partners, and we amplify all together. So that's the primary thing about it. What makes marketing the core of our marketing, I guess.
It's like you have your own community, which already reinforces the further efforts coming from marketing.
Yes, exactly. So you have the standard distribution stuff, like, I don't know, you would like launch a new feature. So you go in app, you have email communication, you have personal brands, you have what have you, like all these channels. But the thing that was very unique to HeyReach was the fact that even without any marketing, which is what I realized, back in the early days, is at least that's the way our industry works. So people without any marketing at all, early user of HeyReach would start building LinkedIn outreach campaigns, and then they would share it on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn for them was both their authority channel, like they're building their own personal brand, but it was also their acquisition channel, because an agency user of HeyReach is driving clients that way. Same stuff for sales teams, growth teams. And so that was like a brainwave in my mind, which was, hey, word of mouth has potential, because with this thing, in track, like you don't have to pull people's sleeves and say, hey, please share my content, please share my content, please share my content. But it's more like, if we make content, that creates a win-win situation. So an agency user is driving clients, a sales or a growth team is driving authority, or even like leads of their own. If we make this win-win, that's how this model will work, and it kind of like exponentially grows. And we managed, to do that, and it was definitely one of the best team efforts that we did.
Sounds very coherent. Continuing this discussion, can you walk me through a specific scenario? Let's say a prospect sees a HeyReach case study in a LinkedIn post from your team or on some partner blog article, then forgets about it, searches Google 2 weeks later, signs up on a landing page. What click attribution would say that was an organic search? What actually happened in your tracking system?
So it's like a little bit of a hybrid, honestly. Not sure how happy you're going to be with the answer, but so here's the thing. I don't necessarily stress myself with attributing every single thing. I don't think it's even possible, even with this type of technology. And so it's very, very hard. For me, what matters on the awareness side is to do, like positive explosions everywhere we can. And if people kind of see the post and then see the blog or vice versa, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that they landed in the acquisition, and you can more or less connect the dots when you're analyzing the numbers, like see the correlation between trends. If our organic traffic is increasing or something happened on LinkedIn, like a virality thing, like we can kind of correlate with sign up explosion or something like that. But what we can track though are very specific signals, and we try to stay closely in touch with sales so they can tell us which signals are performing the best. So for example, for awareness, you have, if we take LinkedIn as an example, like our user ambassadors who are posting completely on their own, they are our strongest channel on LinkedIn. That's like number one by far, like millions of impressions and things like that. Then you have the second layer, which are experts and creators, our influencers, where we co-create content together, in a more disciplined fashion and things like that. That's our strongest channel. Drives a little bit, definitely less than the organic ambassadors, but still they do a couple of millions in total impressions in a given time period. And then the third layer are personal brands, which, until Ilya and myself were removed, like it was very, very stable. Even now, like the guys are posting and it's fine, but that's the third in terms of total awareness. But if you then ask sales, it goes like this, because the most qualified warm leads, they come from our posts and our company page. And so back when, LinkedIn allowed us to have one, we were generating a lot of warm leads for outbound. And so this was like an influence notion that we could measure. These posts are generating qualified warm leads that in essence boost the reply rate for our outbound team who are driving out these inbound led campaigns. And then experts and creators are still number two, and number three are user ambassadors, because we can't scrape all of them, it's like a massive amount of things. And so it depends on how you look at it. But from the awareness standpoint, I'm more worried about what's the reach, how many people are we getting in the top of the funnel and then pushing them in the middle. And then where I very much focus on attribution are things like who's coming to our events, who are engaging on specific posts like promotion posts and things like that, our ads, or let's say free trial signups, like what's the quality of them, like in which tier do they belong, and stuff like that. That you can attribute in a very predictable way and then send these as like a qualified signal to either sales or success team.
That's a pretty comprehensive approach, and it supports the thoughts of my previous guest, Adrian Sviko from Connectis, where he described his approach in B2B outsourcing company, like mapping the dots and connecting them together in order to see the direction instead of trying to understand what exactly works and then leverage that and utilize further.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I always hated the choice. Like, there are two types of marketers. There are the creative ones, in which I belong, and there are the growth/engineering ones, who are a bit more technical, more number-driven and things like that. And at some point earlier in my career, I wanted to take the best out of both worlds. And so grow the revenue, attribute things, but also do some cool things on the branding side, make word of mouth kind of click, and have this awesome inbound channel kind of working for you. And that's why, like, you can't really, unfortunately, attribute everything in the creative space. It's impossible.
I fully support that. 100% agree. Looking at your growth, I can see that the model works, so worth picking up specific methods. You mentioned the sales team, so let's talk about the revenue attribution specifically. In SaaS, the gap between first touch and revenue can be month. Trial sign up, first paid conversion, upgrades, expansion. There are all different revenue events. When you look at attribution at HeyReach, how do you actually attribute revenue to marketing?
So you have this split between self-serve and sales-led. So these are basically graphs. So sales-led is a high-ticket lead who requires a human touch. Self-serve, as you know, is a user who kind of comes in, finds their own way, and they can utilize the product without human touch. And so you can split the revenue and users and free trials according to, sales self-serve versus sales-led. And you can also do some cool things in the sense like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, qualified, or whatever your tiering system is. Like you can see, for example, we get like over 5,000 free trial signups a month. How many are T1s, how many are T2s, how many are T3s, how many are sales-led versus self-serve. And so that's the way it kind of gets attributed. And most of these leads are inbound, like just because of the nature of our channels and the historic time we had to build it and stuff like that. But you can always split and say, okay, these guys came from outbound campaigns, these guys came from ads, or was it like influence thing where multiple channels worked on this slate? So it really depends on the scenario, but the good thing about it is the way I know it's going to be a little bit fluffy, but for us, definitely for me, but even for the entire team, it doesn't really matter if marketing was key in getting this slate or if it was sales. Like what matters to us is revenue. Like, is revenue coming in? And all the metrics that we are analyzing is just how can we do more of that? So if I know that using Clay ads and matched audience together with outbound is working, all I need to do is get the signal, this is working. It doesn't matter the number, it matters just the trend. Okay, let's double down on that. Let's do more sales and marketing campaigns together. And so marketing can be the person who's passing the ball or shooting a winning shot. It doesn't matter. Like, we can do both. What matters is if the ball is becoming a bucket. And so there's no pressure, and our CRO doesn't, put that pressure on us, honestly. And co-founders like, okay, marketing has to deliver this amount of leads. It doesn't really work that way. And I feel like with this amount of users and thousands of users coming in on a monthly basis, it's like they all have their own paths. For us, it's just like allowing them to come in as quickly as possible and then giving them the most frictionless way possible to win with the product. And so multiple teams have touch points on this. It's tough to attribute it by team. That's what I'm saying. You can have
that
some
makes perfect
estimation,
sense.
but not like an exact number with exact channel with exact person.
Exactly. This is exactly this difference between this mechanical approach which you described and creative one plus team game.
Yeah, exactly. You can do some specific campaigns. For example, let's say you're running let's say your tier 2 are very specific leads and you are organizing an event. So you can look at your T2 signups, invite them, and then marketing is responsible for inviting them to the event, getting them excited about a specific integration that we launched, and then showing them ads, about use cases and things like that. And then people who don't come in on their own, that can be sent to warm leads to sales. And so sales can then run inbound lead. And so it's primarily marketing driven if you look at operations. And sales is the person who's open behind the bucket. All we need to do is pass the ball at the right time and they just need to squat it. It's an easy tap in. And so you can say marketing did the heavy work, but that's not the point. The point is just like the scoreboard.
It's just not possible to distinguish who actually did that. All right, continuing the topic of numbers, most SaaS teams optimize for CAC, because that's the number they have from day one. But LTV per channel takes months to show up. How do you balance decisions you need to make this week against numbers you won't have for 6 months?
Interesting question. Luckily for me, so our CEO is a very brand and content driven guy. And so he is usually the one, even if I'm thinking, do I start this month or next month? He would rather push me to start immediately. And if he has a hesitation, then I kind of try to push him. And so I think we bounce off each other in that fashion where we just want to test something as soon as we can and then see how it works. By growing this together and with the rest of the team, we kind of understood that, okay, if you, for example, want to do let's say we're currently doing an experiment that we need 3 months at least to get the results, but there are some checkpoints that we want to cross and see if it's working. And so I think the way you can do this is you split it into, okay, this is a growth marathon or a longer sprint I have to do, but is there something like a hypothesis I can do to test it? For instance, I'm curious about Clay ads and kind of having this like matched audience. And so instead of making it a super, super complex project, I would just go, okay, let's create a segment, let's match it, let's see the numbers, let's run the ads, see how it works, get familiar with the op, get some early results. And then with those learnings, in 2 to 3 weeks time, let's double down and do more of these ads. So that's the way I approach it. And luckily nowadays there's less resource constraints that we had in the early days. In the early days was simply the matter of prioritizing, which is going to bring bigger impact and how we're going to measure it and what type of skills do we have to execute this appropriately. And so we would prioritize, we had like 10 cool ideas, but we can only prioritize 1 or 2. That was the tough part in the early days because of all the constraints and small team and everything. You need to prioritize nowadays as well, but nowadays it's easier because you have the budget, you have the people, and it's the only matter of like what goes first, I guess. Like inevitably you can test everything you want.
So it's a startup approach inside of startup. You basically search for something which is working and then trying to scale it with the resources you have.
Yes, I think it's, what's that motivational like sentence, like fail fast and fail loud. So do something. Exactly. If you make a mistake, just tell it. It's like, hey, I screwed up this thing. Like, this is the way I'm planning to fix it. And then you do it again. Oh, it works. Let's double down. And most importantly, I think the real challenge when you kind of, let's say, cross 10 million approximately, you start hiring and the teams get bigger. You want to make sure that message is like getting across the departments, because sometimes departments start working in isolation. That works in the early phase, but in the later phase, there's much more alignment. And if you don't do that, usually it creates a lot of duplicated work and a lot of headaches everywhere. And so you just want to make sure that this signal is not working. Sales needs to tell us as soon as we can, so we don't waste time doing stuff, like this. And so ensuring that fail loud and fail fast is working in cross departments is instrumental in the phase that we are at the moment.
Yeah, I feel your pain. And circling back to the topic of signals, so content, community, guest podcasts, newsletter, a lot of what drives your pipeline probably doesn't show up in any dashboard, as you mentioned. How do you make investment decisions when the biggest signals are the least measurable?
I think it's potentially some research you can do and gut feelings. Probably, maybe your past experience and things like that. So for example, let's say you want to go on a podcast, but the question is, how big is the podcast? What's the audience? Who typically listens? And what's the distribution model? How do these guys that are inviting me to the podcast distributing this? Like, can we do something creative? Is it like a webinar where people join live, or is it a pre-recorded podcast? And then it really depends on these things that kind of, it's a webinar and we want to do, instead of a big webinar, we want to do a very small thing, but a very qualified thing, and make it like a hackathon where it's like a workshop. We're building it, in the place, and it's a very specific type of people who are doing the exact same thing. You can attribute it really easily. But if it's a podcast where it's recorded and it goes live, everything depends on the distribution firepower and what cards you have in the Notion and what you can do to potentially attribute it is, let's say this episode goes live, what I can look at is the impact on branded search. Like people hearing about HeyReach on our podcast, if it was like 10,000 people listening, I can measure the next 7 and 14 days and have an approximation of, did it impact the brand? Are more people now Googling HeyReach or, like things like that? So there are ways in which you can do some correlation, which can facilitate better decision making.
So you basically look on how much it would resonate in future, and the more it would resonate, like the more chances this something would get the investment.
Exactly. And I think like one of the components also is you might go on a podcast, with the person who's just building it, or you might go to a webinar with a person who's your friend, and maybe the audience is not, that big and things like that. And so I think it's important when whatever marketing experiment you have is to kind of set expectations. For example, on my personal brand accounts, when Claude hype appeared, Claude Code and stuff like that, you could easily go viral if you said things like, Figma is dead, Claude Design is going to take over it, especially if you were a couple of the first guys who did it. But that's never my goal. Like, I don't want to do that personally, even if I get the virality. And so I might do something that's more of a tactical post. And so it would be foolish of me to have an expectation that my post is going to go viral if it's more actionable and more niche towards a specific audience, rather than something that's appeared to the masses. And sometimes I think marketers, you want to do this, but have this type of a goal. Or you want to do a branding initiative and have a sales KPI. It doesn't work that way, definitely not in the short run. And so sometimes the mistake is even at the beginning. You boarded the wrong train and inevitably all the stations are wrong. So there's also that component to your question, from my at least experience and some of the mistakes in the early days.
Thank you. That's very wise. Marketers never cut the corners. This is the advice from Vuk. So I'm interested to know what's a metric your team stopped tracking because it was lying, and what did you replace it with if there was a replacement?
I don't think there was ever a metric that we stopped tracking, like specifically. Like, I think it really depends on the campaign. And it also depends on the last thing I said. Like, what's the goal of something and what do we want to do about it? And can we qualify it? Like, for example, total free trials or total followers on LinkedIn, it's not as relevant as the number of qualified free trial signups or qualified people or ICP fit people who are engaging on our posts. So we would deprioritize these total numbers. We'll still track them, but what's more important is like to get the context is to get the qualification right. And so you definitely know what's happening. Same thing can be applied to any channel. Like if we are inviting somebody to a webinar and if the wrong audience comes, that doesn't convert, it's not the problem in the content, because if you didn't have this qualified metric, like out of 200 guests, 192 are not going to use LinkedIn outreach, they're just curious about it, or whatever the case may be, you might say, oh, out of 200 people who came, nobody converted, we need to do better content. The content wasn't the problem, it was the promotion of the webinar. And by qualifying the audience who's coming into this is what matters. I would say we started prioritizing these qualified metrics, so to say, that gives us particular context and point us in the right direction. That was the biggest switch, I think, in the early days of HeyReach, and thank God it's still the case.
Glad to hear that it still works. Sounds like working something. During our conversation, you described very explicitly your approach, but I want to summarize that for our audience. If you had to describe your current measurement approach in 3 principles that another SaaS CMO could steal, what would they be?
So I can tell you that there are 2 KPIs that my team is measured against. It's the number of free trials, and then everything we discussed below it. And you have the number of warm leads, qualified leads in our ecospace who are maybe engaging with us or signing up but not converting. And so that's let's say the beginning of my measurement system. And so for free trials, I could get potentially where are they coming from and have some estimation. I could analyze every single tier, and then I could plan specific activities. Okay, if we want to get all tier 1s who didn't convert and reactivate them, we can do these initiatives. If we did this and that in Q2 and our free trials increased by, 30% compared to the previous quarter, what did we do in Q2 that we didn't do in Q1? What did change? And so how can we do that more? On the flip side, the warm leads is the same deal, but I might say, hey, we have this particular LinkedIn profile and we're not getting awareness of this particular tier. If we qualify the engagement on our head of sales like LinkedIn profile, we realize that not a lot of people in this tier are engaging. An immediate action point then would be, let's connect with more of these people and have them, be exposed to that type of content. And then have this, LinkedIn thing as a cheap awareness channels for us because it doesn't cost much. It just requires time and discipline. And so, but the beginning of my new measurement system begins with these two metrics, like free trial signups and warm leads. And then everything else is more like something you can't put the precise number on it, but it's the strength of our awareness, the strength of our word of mouth, and the number of posts, for example, that you've seen and approximate impressions and things like that. But the main primary things are free trial signups and the conversion rate behind it and warm leads.
Yeah, the model sounds pretty simple and flexible. So it's quite easy to apply it to any
very
kind
complex
of
and annoys you frequently because you always have to maintain it and everything. But I think it's the best because I think the tech we have at the moment allows us to, 5 or 6 years ago, you couldn't measure it this way. You had to take a lot of guesses. I think now it's better and it's more than enough for you to, to point you in the right direction and say, okay, this is working, let's double down, or this is not working, and the particular thing that's not working is this. Let's make it better. That doesn't make it easy though. You still have to figure it out, but it's, you get to focus on it faster.
So dashboards versus conversations. When do you trust the numbers and when do you trust talking to 5-10 customers instead?
I always do both. I don't get these trade-offs. You just, you do both. Why choose only one? I think talking to users, especially if you are a marketer who doesn't frequently use your own tool, you don't have that operator's knowledge because you're not walking in their shoes. And so you're not really qualified to have an opinion in a way, right? And so talking to users, you can understand how does it feel from their end? Is this the thing, the feature, how you wanna, how you build it? Is this the way how they're gonna use it? So this is very, very valuable. On the flip side, data gives you patterns, especially if you have tidy data. So you can say, okay, we built this agency feature. Let's segment all the agency users. Let's not look at all total numbers of all users, just agencies, and look at how they are using this. How many activated? How many continue to use it after week number one? What was the impact on the key metrics and things like that? And so now you can kind of combine, because you can't talk to everybody. You can combine, the knowledge out of both channels and make a very, very smart decision compared to, let's say, if you only look at the data but you don't have the real life context, or if you based on 10 discussions you had.
Concur with you. I also had heard this approach, and I think that marketers still be present in trenches with the salespeople and on the calls with the clients. Those are just different levels of the perspective, whether you are in trenches or you are looking at the dashboards in the aggregated mode, but still connecting different worlds. I think this is in the nature of every marketer, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And also, sometimes you can also, with all this technology, you can connect their note takers to your Claude. For example, the entire sales team. I, for example, have this agent that just analyzes on a weekly level all the calls, and that gives me the details. What are they asking? What are they mentioning in terms of what do they need, classified across tiers and things like that. And so I can make educated decisions on how to optimize the website. Is something unclear? Or I can make educated guesses of what's missing in terms of, features and what's the, something that gets mentioned a lot. A lot of these guys could mention things like, hey, I asked Claude, Gemini, or ChatGPT, what's the best LinkedIn outreach tool? And a lot of people do this on the call. And so we get that attribution this way. And so it allows me to reward the team who's responsible for that success. And it also tells me, hey, a lot more people are kind of asking these things. And so we have to monitor our presence in the LLM. So I think when you say I'm going to talk to users, definitely do that. But you also have an option to connect the note takers and see the calls, connect your support chat tool, and then see what's happening in the tickets. And then you increase amount of information that your AI can kind of organize and classify and give you very actionable insights. So if you think about it, it's kind of like the perfect cocktail out of the question you asked me. So it's data plus user opinions all in one from everywhere.
Yeah, I think this one is for the marketers who are being afraid that AI sooner or later would replace them, because it actually enables the intel collection we have been driven ever off. Instead of going and asking to the trenches like, what did you hear? How did you hear? From whom? Yeah, that's amazing.
Back 7 or 8 years ago, like I would read those tickets myself. I would export them into like a Google Sheet and then try to organize them somehow in my tables. Or I would randomly call a support or a sales rep on Slack and like, hey, like what's new? Like, is there something you notice that, we can leverage?
Yeah, for sure. All right. One last question to nail this down. I think I know the answer, but to make it explicit, if a marketing leader at a growing SaaS listens to this and wants to make one change to how they measure attribution next week, what should it be?
You already know this. Just make sure you're like analyzing the right numbers. Don't focus too much on totals. Focus on the quality of a sign up, not just the total sign up. I think that's going to make a very big difference. It did for me, honestly.
All right. But this is a topic for another episode. Thank you very much, Vuk. That was an amazing discussion, very productive. A lot of insights about branding in the SaaS marketing, a lot of insights on how to grow bootstrap startup. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Have a nice day. Bye.
You too.